to our 9th episode of the StackCast. This week we have with us Urban Hacker. Urban, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of why you're here today, because you are a bit of a unique guest compared to a lot of others that we've had so far.
Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Urban. And I choose the pseudonym Urban Hacker because it was kind of like a cool play on that. So my background is a bit weird in a way and twisted. So my current job is working in simulation. Think of it like airplane simulation, things like this. But actually that's because of my hobby of 3D art and game engine and things like that. My actual studies are in electronic communication and with a strong emphasis on cybersecurity, server management, and things like this. So this is what I studied, and through that, basically, this became my hobby because I like a lot topic about cybersecurity. It's something that is very important for me. And the hobby I was doing at the time, which was, playing and trying to create video games, now became my job in a interesting way. And what happened is when I joined a small company a few years ago, they had no specialist for cybersecurity, and I was the one with the most experience and knowledge about it. And I did a few things for them. One of them was raising awareness and making sure people would implement the various policy that the company was deemed important. And if it's something that interests you, we can go in more details about how you can do this yourself. And then also did some red team work. If you're not familiar with cybersecurity and digital privacy keywords, basically red team is like offensive attack where you try to break into the system, you try to hack it, you don't destroy anything, and at the end you produce a report explaining to people what went right, what went wrong. And you can also work in collaboration with the blue team, which are the one trying to defend. And so that's my background in cybersecurity. And a bit of a spokesperson, since I quite enjoy actually going and speaking to a crowd, which is something quite unique also for like cybersecurity expert. They usually work more in shadows. And so that's my I would say life story.
All right. So normally we do have guests that have some sort of crypto-based project to talk about. But in this case, you are not actually here to discuss, a project actually. So you're here to kind of just lay some cybersecurity knowledge on us and tell us a little bit more about your experiences in depth. So I guess to start from the very beginning, what drew you to the kind of arena of cybersecurity in the first place?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think since a young age, I was always fascinated by computers. I still remember the first time I saw it was like a Commodore 64 booting up, and just the fact you could type random letter on the keyboard and they would appear on the screen. I was just fascinated by it, and it was something quite unique that it's like an interactive television, right? The television, you're very passive, but this machine was like ready for whatever I was asking it to do. And that was like, that immediately drew me to it. And at the same time, it was the early 2000s, end of the 90s, and there was already some discussion about hackers and stuff. And this was also something that fascinated me. Is like, how can this happen? Um, what makes it that people can hack it? What is a hack? How does it look like? But I never really I mean, I was too young and too inexperienced. Probably the first slightly malicious thing that I did in this regard was at school. I found a way that you could bypass the login screen that the teacher put. But to me, this was not even a hack. It was just, if you do this combination of button, you can just bypass it. Later on, I understood actually, yeah, it's a way to, bend the rules. And yeah, then everything else to me seems quite boring compared to those machines. I had a bit of hard time like focusing in school and everything, like many people. And then later on, when I had to decide like what I wanted to study, I wanted to study electronics. That was my first introduction, like how does machine works. And then very quickly, um, I had a friend quite into like the Linux scene, introduced me to Linux, introduced me to open source, and he was studying, it was, I think, networking and technology communication or something like very fancy. I was like, I want to do this. And yeah, and then like from there, I had a great teacher, um, very practical focused, almost zero theory, just trying stuff out in a lab, in the field. And that was just amazing experience. So yeah, I think it's the fact that you can, I just wanted to understand how those machine works and how you can use them. Um, I love this definition of hacking, which is the one I use. For me, hacking is you understand the rules better than the one who designed it. Because the people who designed this logging screen on, Windows 95 or whatever Windows was it, they made a certain rule and certain assumption that you couldn't bypass it. But they didn't themselves understood the full implication of the set of rules that they define. And you as a slightly, I would say, if you think a bit out of the box and you're still working within the rules, but you find a way to achieve what you want, which is not necessarily what the designer had in mind.
So if I can interrupt really quick before I forget, you were talking about kind of experiences in school trying to get around the login screen. Now, I never even considered doing anything like that in school. I was not that advanced. I'm still not, but I do remember. So it was a big thing in the schools that I went to, and I'm sure for most as well, probably wherever you went to school to, I'm assuming, to figure out different ways to get around the blocks that the school, like the firewalls that the school sets in place and stuff like that. And I do remember spending quite a bit of time in middle school and especially high school, at lunch, going to the computer lab and messing around with it and finding ways to get around that and so on. So that just brought back some memories. I thought I'd ask, was that was that was that a memory that you also share, I suppose? That I'm guessing
Oh, for
that's
sure.
easier than getting around the general login, actually. I think a lot of people figured
Yeah,
that out back in the day.
for sure. I cannot go too much into the specific, but I did for a few years a survival school where it's literally you are in the middle of the mountain and you have to, figure your shit out for a few years, not just days. And in there, no internet access, right? This is literally, learning the stuff. But there was Wi-Fi because obviously, the teacher and stuff, they still had laptop. And one of the things that drew me on Linux was certainly the fact that on Linux you had tools that could, intercept Wi-Fi credential. Now I was never able to like do it successfully, but yeah, it was certainly something that was driving me. Of course, when you're young and you don't really think about all the implications about the firewalls and stuff. Within the group of people that were learning about network, we were a bit privileged. We had normal accounts like everybody else, but because of our knowledge, we were often able to bypass it. We had like one thing that someone did was like a proxy with his home IP. So you install some software on your computer, you open some port on your router, and then this is probably not blocked by the school, which means then you can ask your computer, a bit like a VPN. You can ask your computer at home to go search the thing and then to send it back to you. And those were things that certainly some of us did.
And that is, correct me if I have this wrong, because I'm remembering something from a long time ago. That would just be referred to as a circumventer setup, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can call it like a proxy. Yeah, circumventer is a good.
There were certain sites that served as kind of a proxy if you went through them. And then I was looking into this. I remember looking into exactly what you're talking about back in high school and realizing this is over my head. I don't understand. I wish that I did. I tried, but I eventually kind of gave up because I didn't quite know what I was doing, but I kind of thought I was cool for a while.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you're in high school, you lack a bit the knowledge, but then when every day you are literally learning how to set up routers and servers and connecting them together, making something like this is not that hard after that, right? So this is why, yeah, it was funny because even the teacher, obviously we needed sometime access to some, knowledge that would fall into the category of hacking, right? Which is one of the things that the school prevented. Even if it was an engineering school, they would still, put some strict firewalls. And that was just frustrating because, we couldn't access some online course that we had to follow, right? And then we had to, apply for like exception, but those things take time and yeah. And if you can find a way to go around it, then it's just much faster. And again, what I think was great about learning this is there was very little theory. When I look sometime on the way people, you don't learn how to grow potato without going in the field and just you put potato in the ground and put water on it and fertilizer and all of that, right? And sometimes when I speak with people, I feel very grateful to had the chance to have this kind of learning experience. And this was not like it was just not university, but it was not it was a public school literally, so it's not like private school or anything. It was public school, but it was not prestigious as university, but much more interesting.
So already, even just kind of early life, you had kind of an interesting set of experiences that kind of sparked your interest, it sounds like. So to kind of steer and back on course here, what you mentioned so far obviously has more to do with interest in hacking and kind of looking at the other side of computers, of course, and how they work that most people are not seeing. Do you have any experience? Because to me, cybersecurity also would kind of encompass like scams and things like that. Do you have much experience with dealing with those kinds of threats as well?
You mean dealing as in I was targeted by it, or that I had to design and come up with idea to protect people and or like the company I was working for?
Yes, basically experience in helping people come up with solutions for avoiding kind of falling into these traps and so on?
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you asked this question. So what I'm going to say might be controversial, but most of my peers in this domain, they often blame the user. And it's an easy answer, but it's misleading, and also you're not solving anything. Based on my experience, what works the best is if you put the user at the center, which sounds weird because every single, cybersecurity solution tells you, oh, you remove the user from the equation. You just let us put this fancy threat endpoint detection things. But if the user at the same time, and this is a true story, they just want to watch movie and they install like a rogue computer at their workplace to open and do some torrenting with the fiber optic of the company, that defeat a lot of the high-end security you did. And I think it's important that people are aware of those things and that you empower them and you don't take them as, oh, they are stupid, they don't know. And one of the most tricky thing about this is what you describe to me it's a different topic than cybersecurity. Is more the social engineering, which is related. It's like physical security. It is not technically related to cybersecurity, but it's closely linked and it's closely intertwined. And what I realized with the years and working and thinking about those things is a lot of those things, they are very interlinked. You have spam, scams, various, social engineering tricks. Some of them you could say they are like the shotgun approach, where is you shoot and see which bird is gonna get hit, which is a lot of what users are facing, and it's relatively easy to defend yourself against those. Then you have the more scary and like targeted one. Yeah, so this is something that is it's part of an holistic approach to try to empower individual, and also of course to use technology. You need the help of those tools, of those firewall, of those threat detection, but it's important to have people on board of that.
Interesting. So yeah, so you can kind of separate that into that different category. I like the phrasing that you used with the kind of social engineering. I guess a lot of the kind of scamming stuff would really fall more under that. But they do seem so closely related, and that's why to me I kind of lump them together, I guess. And thankfully I've never been a victim of any of this myself, but I've had an elderly family member recently that's been going through a nightmare with exactly that, being kind of fished and then figured out to be a target and then retargeted and retargeted. And it's very scary, especially when you're talking about people that are kind of in a vulnerable population who may be harder to teach when it comes to how to help themselves, really, and how to take the power of their kind of safety, security into their own hands, as you say. But I suppose that's a whole different topic. But for the average person, anyway, I guess, how would you go about advising somebody on where to begin to do exactly what you were just saying, kind of harness the ability to protect themselves beyond what just some software that they go out and purchase and subscribe to may do?
Before I answer that question, allow me to go back a bit about the social engineering. I think we need to look at the historical trend and what have happened in the past decade or 2 decades. If you remember in the 2000s, you had those wave of viruses, spreading everywhere through PDF, through Microsoft Word, through emails. And the problem was mostly computers. They were not designed with the adversary in mind. Everything was very open, You literally had in the first version of Outlook something to automatically executable that you would get as joint document, which sounds insane, right, nowadays. But again, this is a world where there was no internet, there was no virus and stuff like this. As the machine became much better and you have all those automated tools, what happened is now a lot of the targeting is trying to hack the human mind. And this is social engineering, right? So yes, they are separate categories, but they are very intimately related. And as we have better antivirus, better detection, better this, backups, and this, what we have seen is a shift toward targeting the user itself. Because again, if you convince the user to click on this link and they do it. So yeah, as I was saying, as the technology became better and better at protecting people, what happened is the threat shifted partially to tricking people to do things against themselves. Now, how do you move from like 0 to, cybersecurity ninja? The one thing that is important, first of all, is you need to do a threat model. Because without this, you're gonna exhaust yourself, be overwhelmed, and you will have no idea what to do and how and where, and it's like a headless chicken. It's not very nice. And I've seen so many people, both professional and amateur, getting burned after trying too many things at the same time and having no idea what they were doing. So you take a piece of paper and you write down, what do I have to protect digitally? You can also do the same physically. I will not go into detail about the physical aspect, but certainly, usually in a proper threat model, you would also include the physical stuff, which if you think about it, if you have the hard drive and you can just take them from the table, physically, you can have the best firewall and everything, but yeah, someone just came in and stole it. So you write down what you're trying to protect, what's important, and against what? What type of threat? Is it ransomware? Is it coworker, partners? Is it children running around and not knowing what they're doing with your laptop? All of those things, you just write them down, right? And by doing this action, you add a lot of clarity in your head. You start to assign categories, and there are certain things that are more important than other, right? So that's step number one. You need to do a good threat modeling. And after that, you do not necessarily start with the item that is the most important, but you start with the one that is the quickest and the fastest to implement, and that adds the least disruption to your life. So let me roll back a bit. You just did, your categories and what you want to protect and everything. And usually, society school, everywhere that tells you you take the most important item of your list and you work on it. No. Because again, in that case, the most important item is going to be the most important data you need to protect, which is going to be incredibly complex to achieve. And you're going to burn yourself down. And you probably are going to quit after 2 items. So you start with the simplest, the easiest one. My experience is this is password manager. Most people do not use a password manager. Why not? I mean, most of them are free, right? They instantly add a lot of protection to many of the websites. They probably solve already some of the issue for the more important stuff, you know, like banking account and things like this. And more importantly, they have zero disruption on your life. Even better, they improve your life. You do not have to remember password, ever. That is a huge benefit. So not only you took something that is usually seen by people as insignificant, you know, I just use the same password everywhere. Yeah, or I write, or whatever. And you turn it into its head. And now you are, in a sad way, you are ahead. You know, you're running faster than everyone else while the lion is, you know, going after someone. But you just moved yourself out of this category of people who keep reusing their password. That is huge. And this is like in every single presentation I do, every time, this is the number one item. And you will not get, trust me, once you use a password manager, you will not get back to not using one. It is so convenient. They are beyond password manager. To me, they're digital account manager. You manage your account online with that, right? And you're not going crazy. You're not with 20 VPN, 5 routers and proxies. And no, you did the simplest task in all your items.
So I have a
So
question
that's,
actually on the topic of password
yes.
managers. Is there any concern around the fact that one app, for example, would have access to all your kind of most important accounts in a way? Because I could see that being kind of a holdup for a lot of people, besides feeling like maybe there's an inconvenience there, kind of like around 2FA, things like that. But is there any concern to be had about that?
Yeah, this is usually the next question people ask. It's kind of putting all your eggs in the same bunker kind of thing. And you hope the door of the bunker is really, really. And we have seen, I mean, up until last year, there were no major breach of password manager, but sadly last past had this huge data leakage where a lot of their data was compromised and released. And for sure, we have seen people getting hacked and losing access to their account due to that. It is a risk, but compared to what, right? Yes, compared to an utopian cybersecurity guru, incredibly efficient guy, I don't know, CIA type thing, versus you're just reusing every single password everywhere. The way I put it in perspective is, first, you can use a long password, and if you need to remember only one password, it's not that hard. Even better, use a phrase of different words. That way it's extremely easy to type and remember, but extremely hard to guess. And in case the password manager is breached, if your password is long enough, you actually have nothing to worry about. But even better, you have a list of all your accounts, and then you can go one by one and just changing the password. And that's so simple. I mean, think about it this way. The worst case scenario would be one password manager is hacked, your password is too short, they can brute force it, and your stuff is and that's horrible. I'm not like sugarcoating this. It's a horrible scenario. Compare this to you reuse every password everywhere. Facebook is hacked. Now all your accounts are hacked. You don't even know how many accounts you have, right? Because you have no centralized place where you can manage your account. It's gonna be painful because you need to come up with a new password. And as soon as you come up with a new password, now LinkedIn is hacked or something else. And now you're back to square one. So no, it is not a bad idea to put all your password in a password manager. You later on, you know, it's this cycle of threat modeling and risk assessment is iterative. It's not set in stone. Later on, you could do another risk assessment and you can say, you know what, the banking stuff, maybe I put it out of the password manager and I put it somewhere else or in a different account or I don't know, somewhere encrypted. But as a first step, again, we are talking, you know, maybe step number one. Your grandma has no idea what she's doing, you know, you're whatever. Most people are not using password manager right now. And this is like the single simplest item they can do to improve. And then they unlock. It's like a superpower because once you have the password manager, you can then use this to unlock more things. You can manage your account. You can automatically change the password if you are afraid of a breach. If there is one website hacked, it doesn't impact anything else. If you want to change your email because you don't trust Gmail, now you have a list of all the accounts you need to change. Still painful. You still have to change them, but at least you have a list, right? Yeah. So this is why. And do not do this mistake that is seen over and over. Do not compare to yourself to an utopia that doesn't exist. You know, even CIA make mistakes. Even CIA reuse password, right? We have seen this. So do not compare yourself to some utopia that no one is achieving. Or maybe Edward Snowden did it, but only for a few days, and then he revealed himself because the pressure was too much, and he probably would have done a mistake anyway.
Well, what would be the next kind of, you were going through your kind of top recommendations. What would be the next one after beginning to use a password manager?
Okay. I want to use a quick disclaimer about password manager.
Sure.
Do not lose the fucking password. No, I'm serious. Write it down. I know. It sounds funny. Again, every time someone points this out, they're like, Herben, you're joking. No, I'm not. If the password manager is well designed, and like all of them are well designed now, kind of, even LastPass, they will not be able to recover your password. And if you lose your password, you're gonna start from zero. So do not lose that password. Write it down on a piece of paper. Keep it at your place just in case. Type this password. Do not use this password anywhere else. And you cover yourself for like 99% of the failures. But yeah, I got once a new employee. She came, I installed password manager, etc. She saved the password on the browser. Then she lost the browser, she didn't restore it, and then she forgot the password. Now, it was only 2 weeks, so not a big deal. But I said, you immediately change, and we had to start over again. So yeah, do not lose that password. And it's okay-ish to write down a password if it's like in your apartment or your house and you can hide it somewhere, especially if it's a phrase, like a sentence. Very unlikely that someone is going to figure out, this is your master password manager thing. And if someone's steal, or like if you put it in an envelope and then it's open, it's obvious it was breach, right? Yeah.
So what I do, and you can tell me if this is maybe helpful or a little bit of a weak idea, but what I've done for a while now is basically leave hints, but not write down the actual password. Something that would make sense to me or have some kind of relevancy to me, but not necessarily to the average person looking at it. So that even the only written record, basically anywhere physically or digitally, is still not an exact record of the password. And that's worked for me so far. But that's the best I've got.
Yeah. Do you allow me to answer on that or give my opinion?
Absolutely, go.
Okay. So you're doing a treasure hunt, right? And the next thing something bad happened. I don't know, I walk down on the street, get hit by a bus. Now your family is trying to access your account, has no idea. And again, if I go look back at the data, how do people lose control of their password manager? It's not someone physically coming to your house. I mean, this happens, but luckily, this is very rare. Usually what happens is you have a keylogger on your computer. And then, yeah, obviously they read the password, right? Because it's not like, cryptocurrency wallets that have like special hardware and special ways to like prevent those attacks, or security modules in like certain authentication hardware that you can buy. You are entering this password on your computer, which is connected to internet, on a website that can be hacked. Like, and again, don't leave this conversation by thinking, oh my God, this is over, there is nothing I can do. No, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need to put this into perspective. And this is why it's important to start with the list of things that you're trying to protect. Also be realistic. And what you did there, it's a common, how would say, I don't like mistake, but let's use the word mistake so it's easier. It's a common mistake that you're overprotecting something while there are thousands of other stuff that should require your attention more than what you did. And we all do this. We overprotect because that's the perceived threat, which doesn't necessarily correspond to reality. And in that case, you are probably, and I'm not saying this like to like trick you or anything, but just naturally, there is probably something, a lower hanging fruit that would be better for you to dedicate your energy on, right? So what I'm trying is level approach. We improved the security of everybody in the company and for every individual across all the topics in an even, because else it's like you built your house with the fucking, I don't know, reinforced concrete door with like 5 tons hydraulic thing to open it. But then there is a windows you can just break inside. That doesn't make any sense, right? Well, if you just put a fence, a wooden fence, compared to all the neighborhood that don't have a wood fence, you are better off. And this is key to not burn down yourself, because trust me, when you're stressed, you're panicked, you lost access to your password manager, then you forget, then whatever, then the cleaning lady came, threw one of those paper away because it was under your bed or something happened. You don't want that. Now, I'm not saying to change if it works for you, look, probably you, but my perspective is from what does the average Joe, how can the average Joe navigate this incredibly complex topic and not get frustrated after 2 hours because, you know, everything is, they feel completely overwhelmed.
So I think you make a good point there, particularly with what you brought up about if something were to happen to you at some point and your family's trying to access your accounts for whatever reason and no one can decipher what you've left behind. Good point there. Not something I'd considered myself at my age, but honestly, you never know. So that is actually something good to keep in mind that just I don't think comes naturally to think about, especially when you are not really up there in age where you're kind of planning for things like that. But I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, and as I said, you know, now you have 2 pieces of paper to protect, 2 pieces of paper that can be lost. It's much like, since your audience is probably more familiar with like cryptocurrency, this is like multi-sig, right? Yes, it's nice and it adds some benefit, but now you have many more stuff to protect, right? And you increased complexity. Remember, the idea is to decrease complexity, simplify your life, and at the same time raise the bar so that your digital self-defense is much better prepared to handle the different threats in the world that we live in.
Well, thank you
So,
for your thoughts on that. Just before we get too lost, I did want to ask about the kind of rest of your recommendations as well, because we spent a good amount of time on this topic. And as you said, it's the first thing you usually bring up with people. So there's like a pretty heavy level of importance there, but I want to make sure we have enough time to get to the rest as well.
yeah, of course. Yeah, I was about to say, what's the next item, right?
Yes.
So we've just done that. Next item, it's less relevant now, but I'm still gonna say it. Enable encryption on your phone. Now, most phones nowadays, they come with fully encrypted, secure enclave. They're actually often more secure than your average computer.
And this
It used to,
enclave is only on iOS devices though, right?
you do have similar concept on Android for
Okay.
most phones. Yeah. I mean, the Pixel has the Titan module. Anyway, doesn't really matter. So again, we don't do crazy stuff. We don't install any exotic encryption things. We just enable encryption on your phone. So if you're using an older phone that is not turned on by default, check out the setting. It's just a very simple on-off switch, and just enable it. And again, our phone, they have now so many, you know, they can access our bank account, they can access our crypto wallet, they can access our family picture, our work report, everything. You do not want this phone to have readable data if someone finds it. So make sure you turn on full encryption on your phone. That is something very simple to do. But again, most phones of the past like 5 years, they have this on by default.
So just asking for myself personally here and anyone else that might have a similar device, do you know how to access that setting on an Android device? In my case, it would be Samsung, so in their interface, but how would you find that? Is that fairly simple?
I mean, there is probably a search box in the settings, and you can just search for like encryption or secure or something like this, and you can go and enable it. I don't know the specific for the models, but I know that nowadays pretty much all the phone they have this option. because again, it's so ubiquitous, right? Everybody has one and everybody has to be secure. So yeah, that would be like the next step. Oh, and before that, sorry, I just want about the password manager is make sure once you install it that you use unique password everywhere, right? Just like if you install a password manager and then you reuse the same password everywhere, you gain nothing. Just as a side note.
Well, I'll
And
check to make sure I have my settings in order after this then.
and now, by the way, we can leverage the password manager to potentially store the PIN code of the phone in the password manager. Because again, if we lose this PIN code, there is nothing the manufacturer can do to unlock that device, right? This is extremely complex.
I know there is
Now,
a way to completely reset the phone in general. I've unfortunately had that happen to me before. I have left a phone out somewhere in a store. Someone picked it up. They brought it home. They completely reset it. Luckily, I was able to track it and show up at their front door and get it back, but it had been wiped by then. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So guess what's the next item on the list? Backups, right? So this is not strictly cybersecurity, but again, it's data we are trying to protect. And often it's important data, either for your company or for yourself, family picture, things that you cannot really go back and make again. And it has also a cybersecurity aspect to it, because ransomware usually target this aspect by encrypting your data, forcing you to pay some kind of ransom. There again, you can go crazy. If you go on YouTube and you look for like backups, everything you will see is what? Do it at least 5 times in 7 different locations with a hard drive and USB stick and whatever. Don't do that. Start
It's not going to
simple.
be realistic for the average person anyway.
Exactly. Go buy a hard drive and just copy your file. That is the most simple thing. Now, as you progress in your journey toward more like a safer person in the cyber world, there are software that automate this, where you can literally plug your hard drive and then you can just say do a backup and they do it. I think one is called Duplicati, if you're interested into that.
Okay.
So why an external hard drive? Why not cloud? Why not something else? So this is, again, simplest thing that people can do. First is you have a hard drive. Everybody maybe has one, even now. It's going to be fast for everybody because it's going to be using USB 3, probably, or USB, which is going to be faster than the cloud, in Africa, or in some, remote location somewhere. So you're not going to spend hours and hours and hours. And also because it's offline, you reduce a lot of the attack vector from the cloud. When you see a celebrity getting, their private picture online, things like this, you need to be aware of those things. And yes, it doesn't only happen to celebrities, but I would say data backup is important. If you want to go fancy, you could also encrypt it. Although for a first, I do not recommend. Why? Because again, it's more complex and you risk shooting yourself in the foot because you're going to lose this password. However, first item was password manager. So you can leverage the password manager to first encrypt the data before you back it up, right? Which is a really, really powerful thing. Now, in this guide, I don't want to recommend software and things like this. I just want to try to get people. I mean, usually when I do those presentations, I have on PowerPoint, those are the software where you can get them and everything. but I think it would be boring for a podcast. But I want you to get the idea that you can search yourself on the internet how you can do this. And yeah, but if you want, I can send you a list of software, and then you can put them in the description or somewhere.
Absolutely. Anything that you think would be a good idea to go ahead and add in the description whenever this is posted, definitely send it my way and I'll get it put down there.
Yeah. So now, we did not change much, right? But we have an encrypted phone, we have backups, and we can store safely information in our password manager, and we can use this to leverage and enable us to gain privacy and safety in many different ways. And this is a nice way to bootstrap this problem. And if you do that, you are already you protect yourself against ransomware because you have backups. You avoid falling from all those data leak where everybody's using the same password and then they get completely fucked. And you simplified your life because you don't have to remember a password. And that is and again, it's sad that you don't. I mean, this is a bit of a rant, sorry, and a tangent, but
You're fine.
every single cybersecurity guide out there, do not why do people fail at this? Because we tell them they are stupid. We don't understand how humans work. We want simplicity. Nobody wants to do that, even if I could get away with this, of course I would. Everybody would do, right? So we need to find solutions that are empowering the user rather than how to say that insulting them or something. Okay, do you have any question about backups, or do you want me to move to the next item?
No, oh, I kicked something. Sorry about that. I'll just be abusing the camera in the background, sorry. But I actually had a question that I had earlier and I had forgotten it and I just remembered. So if you don't mind me asking, I wasn't sure where to insert this earlier, but you'd mentioned keyloggers earlier. How common are those exactly? Is that something that the average person is likely to ever deal with? Or do you have any statistics on that?
Look at how many people lost Bitcoin and cryptos because some keylogger copy-pasted a Bitcoin address and replaced it by something else. Now, it's a surprisingly large amount of people, which is kind of scary. I think what happened is usually there is a direct financial benefit to replace the address of someone when they do a Bitcoin transaction. There is the cost to risk, the cost benefit analysis is way asymmetrical. If you can pull this off, you get instant reward. Now, if you start stealing master password from password manager from people, then you need to figure out their account. Then you need to look if they have something interesting, and it takes way more time. So I don't think I really saw people having. I'm sure it happened, but usually they would go for the quickest buck, which is, hey, you know what, we stole your Bitcoin and there's nothing you can do about it. So I don't have numbers for that, but I just try to put this in context. Do not think you are personally. This happens, by the way. It happens to normal people, but usually if you're not personally targeted, it's less of a worry. But be careful.
Interesting. Okay. There was a time that bringing up another family member briefly here, someone experienced a hack of their Amazon account and we never did figure out exactly what happened there, and that was one of the only cases that made sense, but to be targeted in that case also did not make sense. So it kind of led me to wonder, well, how common is this issue actually? And if it's not very common, then it likely wasn't the issue, but it stuck in my head ever since then, because at the time that was the best theory of what had gone on, and no one higher up at Amazon could figure anything out either, obviously. And this is an interesting experience. So out of personal curiosity, I wanted to ask about that really quick. And I think it's something
Yeah,
to
no,
hear about more often these days, and maybe more people actually know what that means. So
yeah, yeah. I think for this, it's an interesting question, and it's right to ask it. I don't have data for that. Just be aware this is something, and if you don't believe me, go on Twitter, go on Reddit, and look for how many people got their Bitcoin address swapped when they were doing transaction. But again, threat model, right? We go back. We are trying to level the security, because there is the risk that we go on a tangent and we're like over securing something, but there is dozen other items. For instance, we didn't encrypted our computers yet. We didn't encrypted our backup, or maybe we did, but like there are many other stuff. You could lose your laptop tomorrow in the train, and it's devastating. So next item, I think it's full disk encryption of your computer. And this one, sadly, you need, like all the other one, they were kind of easy peasy. This one is more tricky. I partially blame Microsoft, because I think on Mac you can just do it. Like there is one option like an iPhone, and you toggle it and it's done. On Windows, they reserve this for like corporate user, like enterprise and premium. What I would advise is full encryption. Why? Because it's just simpler. Like if you have to start to deal with, I encrypt this data but not this one, it's, again, you simplify your life. And then on Windows, you sadly have to use like a third party tool. There are numerous of those tools. The one you can try is VeraCrypt, but there is a learning curve. We are not going to explain today how you can do this, but there is more potential for failure, especially because you can have things like your computer doesn't boot anymore and stuff like this. As an intermediate step, you could encrypt the data drive, and then you would know that all the data you put in this hard drive is just encrypted. And you could also apply this to your backup if it's not yet done. And there you still have your computer running and everything. You don't change the actual operating system, but you gain security, and you know everything you put in this hard drive is encrypted.
and do you know why Windows makes that so difficult?
I mean, I don't want to speculate, I don't work for them. I think it comes from like, I think it's just, it used to be a corporate feature. In the past, it was not so important for people to do it. I think it will eventually come. Also, one thing you have to consider is, let's say Microsoft does this, and then people cannot access their computer because they don't understand what they are doing, and now they are screwed. That is a very bad PR. There is probably some of that as well. Sometimes people ask, like, why is there those sub-part implementation, or maybe I don't know, they save your password in the cloud just in case. Well, of course, you can always assume they are malicious, they want to access your data, and in some case that's, they want to, data mine and sell you ads and all of that. But in many cases, it's also because, many people do not fully understand what they are doing, which means, like, if they put an incredibly complex password, then they get locked out of their own computer and nobody can do anything. They're not going to blame themselves for this. They're going to go on Twitter and say, this software is shit because blah, blah, blah. And I think there is some of this. But if you install a third party, then you know a bit more what you're doing.
And that kind of removes a certain amount of blame on them, I guess, if there were to be kind of a poor implementation on their part.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it brings money because now you have an incentive for a bit more cybersecurity conscious user to just move to enterprise or corporate or whatever plan rather than the family or personal edition.
Of course. And then what about Linux? I'm assuming this is much easier on Linux.
Yeah, it's like Mac. You basically have like a toggle somewhere and you can just click it and it's done, which is one of the things I think that Unix in general did right. It's very easy to do. But yeah, I mean, I give you just one example that, Apple was in trouble because you could use emojis in the password, which is great, I think. But what happened is you couldn't access the emoji keyboard on the login screen, and then you were locked out, right? So yeah, those things are tricky, right? And then you had someone who felt very smart. Oh, I can use an emoji for the password. What Apple did, I think it was a bad decision, is they removed possibility from adding emoji. Personally, I would just add the emoji keyboard on the login screen.
That does make a lot more sense. You would think intuitively that would have been the next step to correct things, but
they are nuanced. Yeah, there are nuance to that because usually the login screen of every modern operating system, whether it's Linux, Windows, or anything, it's a specially designed, hardened part of the system, right? So maybe there is also security, like if you suddenly put the emoji keyboard, probably the code in the emoji keyboard is not as strict as everything else in that login page. This is why on Windows you need to do Control Alt Delete. It's because when you do this combination, it bypasses any keylogger and it goes straight to Windows kernel in the core of the system. And then it executes only one thing, which is shut down everything else and show the login screen. Shut down all the process, potential keyloggers, potential whatever, screen recorder, and just execute the login screen. And basically Mac and Linux do very similar things. So there are reasons for why they might not have wanted to have the emoji keyboard. But I still think it would have been cool to have the emoji keyboard and to be able, yeah.
Of course. I think that might have been beneficial for a lot of people that maybe might not remember their passwords very well. Having that kind of for people with more of a visual memory anyway, I could see that being beneficial maybe. And plus just adding more potential characters into the mix. So
that's an easy assumption, but I think you need to think about it holistically. How much more security this bring versus, potentially now we have a keylogger running inside the emoji keyboard. I could see a headline, new keylogger found on this operating system because, there is the emoji keyboard, something. I could see this happening, right? But yeah. So quite a long explanation about, encrypting and securing your computer. But yeah, in general, computers, what you have to understand is they are less secure than phones. They come from a different architecture, from an older way of doing things that was not like phones. They are much more modern. It's much easier to completely redesign a phone system. And people change phone in a much faster pace. You have less dependency to the past. You do not expect, 20 years old phone software to work on your newest Samsung or Mac or whatever.
yeah,
iPhone, sorry, not Mac.
And then beyond if you have covered everything you wanted to touch on, of course, about encrypting your computer, was there anything beyond that, or was that kind of the final big step that you would recommend?
I would say if you do all of this, you are now in the top 90%. of people will not do this. You're already in the 10. You're already like approaching what banks and other bigger corporate entities that have like dedicated department to solve those things. And the nice thing about this is if you do this for yourself, but now with like work from home, you probably have on your private computer, some corporate things anyway lying around this. You are also improving the security of your company or your employer, right? And this is why my approach, the way I design my workshop and my presentation is to try to raise for everybody, not just one or not just the most fancy topic that you read on the news, but everybody at the same pace with the same understanding for everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you can go much deeper. There is maybe one last thing we could mention. Yeah, but do not make it too inconvenient. Right now, if you do all of this, your digital life is simpler, right? It's simpler. Maybe you have to think about backups, but you should have done it anyway, probably, and you don't have to remember all the password you used. And because your computer or your hard drive is fully encrypted, you don't have to worry about, do I encrypt this document or not? No, all of them are encrypted. And there is no performance impact. I tried once to encrypt Steam and all the Steam library for like many games, and I played them. They work just fine. You have almost zero impact on performance. If you can play game, you can open Word document and edit Excel spreadsheet.
I wouldn't have thought to ask about that, but that's actually a good thing to mention.
Yeah, because people have this perception that encryption is slow. What you need to understand is this is so widespread, like encrypting stuff is so important and widespread that there are special part in microprocessor, in CPUs, dedicated to just encrypt and decrypt your data super fast. So it basically makes zero difference. And I cannot go in details because, confidential data and stuff, but we have done sometime benchmark for clients who had really insane requirement, cloud data with dozens of points in 3D space and stuff, made zero visible difference.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. There was one last point that I wanted to mention. If it's not too late, or if you're not tired about, me explaining all of this.
No, go ahead. We have all different lengths of episodes at this point, so we're already in it for the long haul for a longer one here, so you're good.
Download and start using the Tor browser. It's free, it's easy to install, and start to use it when you need to browse confidential data. And you might think, well, why do I need this? My partner, she used it to browse airplane tickets, because it acts as a free VPN, and you avoid having, airlines showing you higher and higher. Now, this is not very confidential, but this shows how you can leverage this tool for everyday use. Now, in the case of Tor, what happened is it is slow, right? This is for sure, but you can start using it for, I was asked some time, I cannot go into the specific, to do, research about competition. You do not want your IP with your Google account logged in, typing in Google keyword about your competition, and then clicking on their link, which they probably have trackers and everything. You do not want to do that. You do not want to research patent with your Google account if you are doing patent IP protection stuff. So for that, I would recommend not even a VPN. I would recommend to use Tor.
And actually,
I know. Yes.
sorry, I have a question whenever you're done with this thought.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, based on my experience, I know quite a few companies that you might even be surprised that use Tor to do exactly that, right? Because they are aware, they know. And one of my introduction to Tor was basically at the time where I was working, I had to do some research and they asked me, please, Herman, use that tool. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I'm sure most people watching this might be familiar with the answer already, but just in case for anyone that isn't, how would using a browser like Tor differ privacy-wise from using like an incognito mode on Chrome or Firefox, etc.?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Now, I know this is gonna sound cliche, but I have done another podcast, an almost 2 hour long. It's divided into 2 episodes, explaining how Tor works, what it does, and everything. So if you want, maybe you can link those, because I don't want to just, go for another hours here explaining about Tor. But the difference between Tor and incognito. So incognito, its only purpose is that it doesn't leave trace on your computer. That's it. It does nothing else.
I think there's a
And
lot
this
of
has a lot.
misunderstanding around the level of protection that you get from
To me,
incognito.
it's zero protection. I mean, it's like, I don't know, maybe there I'm going on a tangent and over securizing something, but like, so when you use a web browser, right, and you browse internet, some of the data that you get from internet are stored on your local computer. So when you go on Google, the Google picture will be locally saved. And if you think about it, every time you go on Google, it doesn't make sense to download again data from Google. It's just much easier to, display the image. And it does this for many things. Like it does this for credit card information, for emails, like all the stuff you see that is pre-filled for your login credentials. So when you are automatically logged in into Google, often it's because there is like credentials saved on your computer. What incognito does is it just doesn't save them. It pretends it does so that websites don't break. But at the end, when you close the windows, there is nothing. Now, in cybersecurity circle, we say that its only purpose is that your partner doesn't know you watch porn. That's it. It's a bit rude
Good
or
explanation.
gamble or gamble or whatever, but it doesn't protect you from your ISP. It doesn't protect you from like website, because websites have different ways to know who you are, because even if you're incognito, you still are using the same screen size. You still are using many, many other things that are the same, same keyboard, same language, same, it's still send where you live, right? Like your regional details. So it's just that you do not save stuff locally. It's useful. Look, I give you an example where sometimes I use it at work. I sometimes listen to music on my work computer. I do not necessarily want to have browsing history about me on YouTube, with like a 10-hour relaxed music thing. It's just, I don't want this, it's kind of private stuff, but it's okay to do on a work computer, depending on where you work, obviously. So I use incognito for that. But it's not like my employer knows that I'm listening to music. My colleagues can look and see that there is a 10-hour synthwave, retrowave playlist in the background. It's just I don't want this in my browsing history or my Google account or Microsoft account or whatever account you're using at work. But Google still knows, your employer still knows. It's the most basic and almost useless protection you can get.
So Google still is keeping track of everything you're searching, not necessarily by storing it in your history, but on its kind of profile of you and your interests for things like AdSense and so on.
Exactly. Because, again, think about it, probably, I already searched synthwave anyway on the Google account, or it's not that hard to build a profile out of you, even if you use incognito. And the proof is, Google, if they cannot track you, they show you a CAPTCHA, right? They show you, please show us that you're not a robot. No, we cannot track you. We don't know who you are. So we want you to suffer because we cannot monetize you. That's how you should read this box, right? So you are doing good privacy online when you see this box everywhere, which is painful. It's annoying. And actually, when I use the Tor browser and I see this, I immediately close. I don't even bother with this unless I really need to access the information. But what you need to understand is, if Google is not showing you that you need to, click on some, I don't know, like some red light or whatever, then probably they can track you and they know exactly who you are.
Interesting. Well, there's a hot tip right there that I didn't expect.
Yeah, so what about the Tor browser? The Tor browser is the extreme other hand. It's like you take everything I said, you design a browser, and you crank it to 11. And what's nice is, again, I go for the lowest denominator, the easiest thing people can do. It's a software that contains a lot of built-in protection to do everything I said, but automatically without having you to care about. You just use it as a normal browser. Now you will get a lot of CAPTCHA, you will get a lot of, click on the street and stuff like this. And maybe it's also time for you, to move to DuckDuckGo and other search engine and other service that respect you instead of track you. But what it does is, first, everybody has the same screen, right? So, or they are put in bucket. So like big screen, medium screen, and small screen. So you don't really know which screen you have. They prevent access to things like location, microphone, like a lot of things that, and again, you could say, why is the microphone, even if I turn it off? Well, the microphone is specific to your computer, It's like it has a serial number that the browser can access it because it needs to know which microphone you should enable or not. And of course, this serial number doesn't change, which means like you can use this to track. It's just an example, right? So it blocks all of this without having you to think about.
And as far as the microphone example there, does it work the same way with like external mics and cameras? Or do you mean just the built-ins?
What do you mean? I'm not sure I understood correctly the question.
When you're talking about it being able to kind of recognize like a serial number, I believe is what you said. Are you talking about it kind of being able to figure out more about the computer that you're using from the mic when it's a built-in mic, or was your example meant to mean even like an external mic, for example?
Any device that is connected to your computer that the browser can access.
Kind of a nitpicky question, but just curious.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. And the thing is, let's say we have both of us, we have the same laptop, same built-in mic, same serial number. We have two different external microphone. Boom, we are two different users. So the more the better, right? Which is why, so the Tor browser, like you cannot do video conference on Tor. You cannot, the chat that we have wouldn't really make sense on Tor. However, it's gonna protect your privacy and make sure like it's gonna defend you. It's gonna be like this private bodyguard online to make sure you stay as safe as possible, no matter where you go. It cannot defend against and everything. And they are like, what if the bodyguard is a rogue, which can happen, you know? I don't want to go too much in detail, but this can happen. Like relay could be malicious. But in short, it's the best tool we have right now for using the web in a truly private way. And usually Tor is more known for its proxy capabilities of bouncing your traffic all over the world. Usually that's how people know it, but it's much more than that. It's much more than that. There is a lot of careful consideration that went into designing a browser that your grandma can use and yet is like incredibly secure. Yeah. So yeah, this I usually also mention it not to, and again, don't use it every day for everything. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot, you're gonna end up exhausted. But when you have to browse, that one thing about competition, about whatever, maybe searching for a new domain that you don't know if already exists and you don't want domain name company knows that you're interested in. Things like this. Use the Tor browser, you know.
That's another interesting use case I wouldn't have thought of on my own, I don't think.
There are many, as I said, my partner who like is not as deep as I am into this. She uses it to check airplane price ticket, right? It's free, it's easy to use. You have a few CAPTCHA to solve, and it's not something people think about, you know, but it's a use case. Or let's say you want to contact, you know, oh, and also the Tor browser is by default incognito. So even the most minimal protection that incognito gives you, the Tor browser gives you, plus everything else, right? And I give you a simple example. Let's imagine your partner is violent and is controlling and abusing you, and you want a way to reach help. You could potentially use the Tor browser, write to some help, you know, victim of domestic violence, something, whatever. When you close the browser, nothing is saved on the computer unless your partner install keylogger and all that stuff and remote access tool and hacking stuff, which by the way is illegal. I'm just like stretching. Unless they do that, they would have no way, even if they check manually your computer, to know you did that. So even in adversarial environment, it will protect you. One last example. I cannot go into the specific, but there was a workplace where they decided to install tracking capabilities on employees' machine, you know. And what those tracking things would do is they would report and analyze all the website you visit by installing in Chrome and Firefox extension to do that. Right? Now, guess what? Guess which browser was not affected by this?
Sure.
Exactly. Right? So in a demo, when we tried the system and everything, open the Tor browser and then boom, done. It was not, because it's designed to protect you against those things. Now, don't get me wrong. they are still in control of your computer. They can still remotely log in. Your employer fully controls your computer. Don't do stuff non-professional on your work's computer. That's a good way to get fired or to get into big trouble. However, it's very interesting to know that the Tor browser was unaffected.
And
because it's
Tor doesn't
designed.
have extensions, correct?
Yes, you can add them, is not recommended
Okay.
because of that.
Something I'd
Because
ever-
again, yeah, you had this discussion, with Agora Desk about attack surface. How you can have, like, when you design a house, you can make it a bunker or you can make it a huge mansion.
And those extensions
What
basically extend that attack surface, correct?
exactly? Because again, like the emoji keyboard we spoke before, it's now one more thing that is running on Tor that you don't really know what it's doing. The one extension I say to people is okay to install is uBlock Origin to block advertisement.
Okay, yeah, that's the same thing I'm using.
Because I cannot live without it. And there are some version of Tor that comes with it. So there are some team that produce custom version of the Tor browser, like I think in Tails or whatever, some operating system that includes it by default, which means probably okay. And this means other people are also using the Tor browser with uBlock Origin. It's a very common combination.
I see. All right. Well, I know you did mention that you had done a pretty extensive podcast episode covering this, and you can send me the links to that so I can provide that for anyone that is interested in watching.
Yeah, sure, no problem. If I forget, remind me on Telegram or yeah.
Okay. And how may I find you on Telegram?
Same as Twitter.
Okay.
At Real Herman Ecker.
Great. I'll go ahead and include that in the description after this as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to throw out there? Any other resources you'd like to provide? Accounts you want to shout out or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, at Real Urban Hacker. You can always reach me. You can write me either on Twitter or Telegram. If you would like more information or even discuss about cybersecurity, I'm always up for that. Just let me know. And yeah, thank you a lot for listening. I hope you were not overwhelmed. Again, remember, first step, you take the simplest, not the most important, the simplest step from your list of items and you do it. And this, as we have seen, unlock a lot of leverage, which you can use to then secure other part of your digital life. I think it's an important lesson that people need to understand. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for going over so many kind of actual real world things that people can do. I would have loved to have gotten a little bit more into some of your kind of personal experiences. So maybe someday if you want to come back and focus on that more, that could be interesting as well. But I think this is going to be the most directly beneficial to anyone watching.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be interesting to do a more entertainment podcast, where we discuss about cybersecurity in an entertaining way, like experience from the field, what can happen. But the idea for the audience is really to get the basic and to understand this is not so hard. I got many people that I personally coached that now are using password manager, have everything encrypted, and they don't even realize it. So it's not so hard to get started. And I hope you don't feel overwhelmed.
Not at all. Not at all. I think the way you laid things out in kind of a list format was actually very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up our 9th episode now then. Thank you so much for spending so much time going over all this in so much detail with me. I really appreciate that. And if you ever want to come back on again and kind of discuss that other angle of things, definitely let us know.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you for your time as well.
All right. And then we will see you guys next week.